Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Brian Engelman here with the Unhappy Hour here on the TNAM Radio Network because the news always matters. This is the name of the show. It's the Unhappy Hour. It's also the Unhappy Hour Sports Show. If you do a search in Facebook for the groups, you can join our group. We just have to make sure that you're a fan of the Indians, Cavs, Browns, or the Buckeyes. You can be a general sports fan, I guess, but this is a very Homer-centric group. We do cover all of the silliness, the weird politics in sports. It's kind of my favorite thing, but it also gets annoying, so then we stop and whatever. But definitely Cleveland-centric, but we'll cover any important story. And this time of year, we always talk fantasy football, so we brought in our special guest, fantasy football draft guru, Mike Murray, and we're going to get to him in just a second. But want to say, if you're watching on Facebook Live, type some comments down here like Brian just did. I see Christopher was watching. As you start jumping in, leave your comments down, and I'll see if I can get to some of those comments with Mike when we do the draft. Check out our homepage, TheNewAmericanMedia.com. Subscribe, YouTube.com/TheNewAmericanMedia. Because YouTube is censoring and hiding and demonetizing our content on their site after developing and building our channel slowly with them over the past 6 years, we have had to open our VidMe account, vid.me. So we're starting to build that platform over there. Not so sure how much longer we're going to be on YouTube. Not so sure how much longer YouTube is going to be friendly to any of their content creators. But that's for a separate topic for a separate show. You can follow us in all those places. Instagram.com/TheNewAmericanMedia. On Twitter, we're at American_Media_. And Facebook, just do a search for The New American Media. And then like the channel, do all that stuff, follow it, leave your comments. We like the fun conversations. So, the fun conversation today is going to be fantasy football. Got Mike Murray in the room. Mike, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Glad to be back on the show. I know we do it once a year, and definitely looking forward to fantasy football season and overall NFL season. Absolutely.
Heck yeah, man. Do you remember how many of these we've done so far? We've had the New American Media for over 6 years. I'm trying to remember how many we've been on.
I want to say you've had me on almost every year. It's been at least 5 years. So, yeah, absolutely.
I think so, too. And there's so many different angles we can approach fantasy football. And, of course, what I like to do is kind of break down our quarterbacks, like quarterback tier number 1, number 2, number 3, running back tier number 1, 2, 3, because I think it's important to do. I also like to have some general conversation about fantasy football in general. So let's start with a little bit of general stuff. Mike, this is year 2. We are in the Unhappy Hour Fantasy Football Dynasty League. This is something new that we started last season. And we're in year 2, and this is your first time playing Dynasty. So explain the difference between regular one-season leagues and Dynasty and what you've learned in this process.
Well, there's a couple things. So regular leagues, like you said, is just 1 year. It's just one and done, and there's no immediate need for looking for long-term players like keepers or maybe some younger guys who you think have long-term longevity. If you're in just a 1-year league, you're just looking for the best players you can throw in a roster and obviously try to win a championship. Dynasty League is more, not only are you thinking, you definitely want to win right away, but you also want to think long-term. You've got a giant roster full of these players. There's not really a lot of people on the free agent market, so you have to kind of use your own bench as your free agency, if you will, and just really try to each year build through the draft, like the rookie draft, and try to stockpile young players for the long term.
Yeah, I think you touched on something important there. Something that I learned was, you rely on your own bench for the waiver wire, and that's the killing part is when you have very talented players go on injured reserve. They're done for the season, and you have it happen 2, 3. I got snake bitten last year. I had between the suspensions and the season-long injuries, it makes the waiver wire impossible to navigate without donating one of your best players to anyone else. And so injuries can destroy you in Dynasty unless you have enough people on the bench, because you're really not playing week to week, seeing who you can pick up on the waiver wire. Whereas in a general 10-man league or a 12-man league, people get injured and then someone becomes a new featured back or the number 2 receiver becomes the number one receiver after an injury or a suspension, and their production goes up. So week to week in a normal league, you have the opportunity to do that, but not so much in Dynasty, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you've got, like, for instance, in our league, I have a few older running backs who are still pretty good. LaShawn McCoy, DeMarco Murray, but, the initial thought last year was, whoa, after a couple of years, I'm going to be, stuck. Well, I think I did a pretty good job in trades and in the rookie draft this year of really injecting some really nice, younger running backs onto my bench. So I think that'll do me well over the next maybe 3 to 5 years.
Interesting. Who did you draft again, first round? Because we had the rookie draft, rookie and free agent draft.
Yeah, so again, I was really looking to go running back heavy in the draft. I think I took, out of my 4 picks, I think 3 of them are running backs. And the first pick I went with Marlon Mack, running back for the Indianapolis Colts. Frank Gore is obviously very old, as we all know, and not to say that he couldn't have another good season or two, but Mack had a pretty successful college career. I think was one of those guys who maybe could take over at some point, so I liked his prospects a lot.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a totally different draft strategy, and I like it. I the only thing I wish we could do is, and I mean we could. It's the off season. We can always talk about it for next year, but maybe to just expand the bench a little bit. Now, I'm one of the guys that's more of the stockpiler and think long-term strategy kind of guys, at least in this particular version of this Dynasty League. You can play these hands like a game of poker. You can do it any sort of way, but, I have Josh Gordon stashed. Great, but he's wasting a space on my bench. I had Teddy Bridgewater, blew out his leg, and all right, well, I either keep him or drop him. All right, at some point you just got to drop them and move on. But it's interesting. I do like it. Now for the newbies, I think we try to start our season Dynasty where we just started the conversation here. That's next level stuff. But let's bring it all the way back to freshman year in college, your introductory course on fantasy football. Mike, just in a nutshell, to a brand new person or they've kind of played but haven't really paid attention, what's the intro level course on fantasy football, whether it's PPR, standard, the scoring, its positions, and how you draft, how you improve? What do you tell the new guy?
Yeah, so if you're brand new to fantasy football, I mean it's pretty obvious, but I would recommend just your traditional non PPR league, just standard scoring, standard rosters. So you typically going to have a quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers. I'm guessing probably 1 flex, which again, if you're new to fantasy football, flex could be most likely either a running back or a wide receiver. And then you got your tight end, defense, and kicker. And then if it's your first year, make sure you go to ESPN, Yahoo, one of those sites, get yourself a cheat sheet, do a little bit of research, maybe highlight a few younger guys you like. And then just a big thing is to make sure you review the league scoring system. I guess a couple big things. Quarterbacks, there's usually one major difference. It's either 4 points for touchdowns or 6 points. I'm in a couple leagues that do differ on that, so that does, rank some of the quarterbacks a little bit higher. For instance, Aaron Rodgers, last year 40 touchdowns. If it's one of those leagues where it's a 6-point touchdown for quarterbacks, I mean, he's extremely valuable. Obviously, some other guys like maybe Brady and Breeze and Matt Ryan are as well. And then the same thing with other positions as well. So just from a real high level for a new guy, that's probably my 2-minute introduction.
All right. Look, I'll take it. Now, the league that we're in so many leagues, it's hard to keep track of them. So for the people that are hang on, let me do this. But hey, got all these messages popping up here. Let me do this. Sorry, I'm trying to read the messages as we go. Okay, Mike, I'm going to hit you with a couple quick questions, and then we're going to get on to some standard stuff so I don't get too far back in the questions. Brian is asking, who do you like the best of the sleeper wide receivers? Do you like Kenny Galladay, Chris Davis, Zay Jones, Cooper Kupp, John Ross? Like, where do you put those players?
Well, honestly, you can't leave out Corey Davis for Tennessee. I mean, he kind of reminds me of Antonio Brown a little bit. Comes from I believe maybe Western Michigan, one of those schools up there. When Antonio Brown in college was a beast, but he played for a MAC school, and what at the time just wasn't a really big school. So if I had to pick maybe 2 or 3 of the top wide receivers sleeper wise, I'd probably rank them Corey Davis 1. I'm a little biased about Galladay. I kind of like him at 2. He had a real big preseason, and Detroit really lacks a really tall wide receiver. He's a real tall, lanky guy, 6'4". Had a pretty good college career, I believe, at Northern Illinois, if I'm right. Don't quote me on that. Big red zone target for Stafford. Think about the other 2 guys. They have Golden Tate and Marvin Jones. Not real big targets. So I like Galladay at 2. John Ross obviously has got amazing speed. The thing there, you got AJ Green going to eat up a lot of targets, and don't count out Tyler Eifert either. He was probably one of the top tight ends in the league, just happened to be injured recently. So I go Corey Davis, Galladay, and John Ross as my top 3 sleepers.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Chris Christophic, he's commenting here in the group. I loved his comment so much I pinned it. He says, I got a guy in my league, let's call him Flyin' Singleman. He really likes kickers. What round should I draft a kicker?
Oh, God, I know that guy named Chris Christophic. I used to hang out with him. Kickers, honestly, don't ever take a kicker. If you're in a 16-round draft, your kicker should always be round 16, no matter what.
All right. Yes. Thank you for the joke. I appreciate it, Chris. Mark Nutter is watching. Here we go. Mark Nutter is asking, what are Mike's thoughts on Bobby Pavtak as a late-round prospect to stash?
Oh, well, you can't forget about Andy Pavtak. I mean, you're talking about Bobby Pavtak. What about his brother? Bobby Pavtak, he might be the best football player on the planet Earth. So he's a clear-cut first-round pick, in my opinion.
Okay, there you go. So there's a nice inside joke. If you're not following, if you're not doing this live, you should do it live, because then we can have the conversation with you. Taking calls. Yes, caller. Hello to Danielle. Hello to Adam, who are now joining the program. All right, so Mike, I guess we got PPR leagues. We have non-PPR leagues. What are some of the different scoring styles and strategies? What things to consider? You already mentioned if a quarterback, the scoring rules in the league, if it's 4 points for a touchdown or 6 points for a touchdown, how that makes a difference. What else do people need to pay attention to regarding the scoring styles and when that'll shift the importance of taking a certain position?
Yeah, so, PPR leagues, there's generally a couple different ones. Half-point PPR, which is just every time a running back or a wide receiver or tight end, every time they catch the ball, they get either a half point, or you got your full point PPR leagues, which they get a full point, 1 point. So what that does is it increases and maybe slightly decreases the value of certain players. Like, for instance, wide receivers, a guy like Julian Edelman, is he going to catch, 18 touchdowns and have 1,500 yards? Probably not, but is he a good possibility for 80, 90, close to 100 receptions? Very possible. And what that does is it increases his value in the league, like a PPR league. If you've got a running back who catches a lot of passes, like David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell, I know I'm naming a couple of the top ones there, but those guys are going to get 50, 60, probably not 70, but maybe close to 70 receptions. So keep in mind that's 1 point every time they do that, on top of the things they're already doing. So it kind of shifts the values of players based on your league type.
All right. We end up doing this, and it always takes a few more minutes than we think it will. I'm thinking we should jump into the positions and start breaking them down by tiers and what kind of season you expect them to have, just like brief rundowns. Is there anything else you wanted to do before we start breaking these down by position, starting with quarterback?
No, let's jump right into it.
All right, so Rodgers, Brady, Breeze, Luck, Ryan. Where do you draw the line for the top tier?
Oh, boy. This is arguable here, but I kind of draw the line right below Drew Brees. So Rodgers, Brady, Breeze is probably your no-brainer tier A quarterbacks. You could argue Matt Ryan obviously had a great season last year. He's kind of been a little bit inconsistent over his career, though, as far as fantasy points. Clearly a very good fantasy pick, but tier A or tier 1, if you will, definitely Rodgers, Brady, and Breeze.
Okay, tier 2. That's where Ryan and Luck come in.
Yeah, tier 2 is probably going to be a handful of guys here. So, Matt Ryan, Andrew Luck dealing with a little bit, I think, of a shoulder issue, if I recall. But, if he's healthy, he's clearly put up some monster numbers before, so he's in there. So Ryan Luck, Russell Wilson's a no-brainer. Cam Newton with his potential, even though he had a bit of an off-season, he's in there. Gotta love Kirk Cousins. I mean, the guy just puts up numbers, and anytime he says something like, you like that, you gotta have him in your second tier. So he's in there. Derek Carr's in there, and then it kind of gets dicey there. I might draw the line there and say that's my tier 2 right there.
All right, go to 3. Tier 3.
All right, tier 3. So I guess Dak Prescott, Jameis Winston, who I actually do like a lot this year, but he just throws a lot of interceptions and isn't careful with the ball, so that's why he's not in tier 2. I actually really like Mariota a lot, especially with the value. And what I mean by that is for how late you can get a guy and how much potential he has. I do like what he could possibly do. I think Roethlisberger is probably a little bit underranked. I'm not sure why he's so low on the ESPN quarterbacks, but so he's arguable tier 2 or 3, but I'll keep him in 3 for now. Stafford, Rivers, that's probably better for tier 3, and then you get into some guys kind of dicey as well. So that's probably it for tier 3.
All right, and so then in 4, who else? If you're drawn from the rest of these, now you got a chance to either go with like Desean Kaiser, maybe Deshaun Watson. You could go with a Sam Bradford, Carson Palmer, Carson Wentz. Out of the remaining quarterbacks, who's worth maybe taking a chance on later rounds?
Well, there's a couple guys I like, and then I'll give you a couple, sleepers, if you will. So, I really like Carson Wentz a lot. They, as we all probably know, they loaded up that team with some good veteran players, Alshon Jeffrey, Torrey Smith, LeGarrette Blount. I think they've got their top 1 or 2 offensive tackles back and healthy. So that offense is kind of ready to go. We all know that Wentz is already pretty solid, so I could see a breakout season with Carson Wentz. Eli Manning, he's always there in the late rounds. If you really wait on a quarterback to run 14, 15, not a bad guy. Carson Palmer is pretty much in the same deal there, and that's about it as far as who I would draft. Now, I'll give you a couple sleepers. I guess I was going to say Paxton Lynch, but apparently he hasn't been great in preseason, so probably pass on him. I really do like the rookie quarterback from Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes. He's got a cannon arm, great college career, played in a lot of prolific offenses, and really Alex Smith, he's just kind of washed up. I mean, we see every year Kansas City, they go so far and then they can't get any further because he's just kind of an average quarterback. So if you're looking in a Dynasty League or something long-term, Mahomes is a guy I like a lot.
And I would go ahead and say Desean Kaiser is somebody you should keep your eye on. The Browns have invested heavily on their offensive line. The Browns are returning some, kind of a power running back and a dynamic pass-catching running back duo that doesn't get overworked. Josh Gordon is looming to possibly come back, but in the meantime, you've went out and fortified the wide receivers a little bit and drafted David Njoku, hoping that Corey Coleman's going to, rebound from having missed 6 games last year with a broken hand. From what I've seen out of Desean Kaiser, that guy can make every throw on the field and he can make it look easy. I saw him make multiple 50-yard, 2 touchdowns. One was ended at the 1-yard line, so it wasn't technically a touchdown, but let's just say they're both 50-plus yard touchdown passes. The one was in the 4th quarter, on 4th down, trailing to win the game. So he's got ice in his veins coming from a big-time college in Notre Dame. I really think with Hugh Jackson naming Desean Kaiser as the starter for Week 3, that's not really saying too much over Osweiler and the rest of the crew, but it looks like he's going to get the starting nod in Cleveland, and the guy can play. He's a big 6'4" quarterback. I'd say keep your eyes on Desean Kaiser. Would you agree or disagree there, Mike?
Yeah, I agree with that. I actually watched some of the game there, and I forget who they were playing, but I thought that he stood in the pocket well. He was able to recognize when a good time to scramble was. Got a good arm, good awareness. So it seems like this might be the best potential season the Browns have had in a while. They clearly had some good draft picks. I think they've rebuilt the offensive line a little bit. So, I'm certainly looking forward to seeing what Kaiser can do. So, yeah, it wouldn't be a bad sleeper. Probably, in my opinion, a little bit more in a Dynasty League, but, definitely not a bad late-round pick.
Yeah, I agree. Probably a best option in a Dynasty League, and I did get him in my Dynasty League. All right, let's move over to tight ends here. I mean, tight ends have been very interesting for me over the past few years. It's been very injury-plagued, low production, disappointing performances from so many of my tight ends. I don't know if that's going on throughout the entire league, but let's talk about it. Usually right at the top is Gronkowski and everybody else. Do you still see it that way?
Yeah, so I've got 4 guys in my top tier for tight ends. Gronk, clearly, from a fantasy perspective, most likely has the highest ceiling. Now, the issue with him, as we all know, is injuries. The guy just can't stay healthy. But if he's healthy for 16 games, you're probably looking at 1,000 yards, upwards of 10 to 15 touchdowns, maybe 70 or 80 catches. So, again, the question is, are you willing to risk that first, second round pick on a guy who has a history of injuries? There are 3 guys in my top tier: Jordan Reed, Travis Kelce, and Greg Olson, who is just such a consistent performer every single year, one of Cam Newton's favorite targets.
Yeah, Olson, how many years has he played now?
Well, he's been with Ron for a while. I used to remember, obviously with me being a Packers fan, I remember with him starting his career with the Bears, was also a very good tight end.
Yeah.
I don't know the exact number of years. I would guess maybe 12 or so, 10 to 12.
Man, yeah. Some of these guys that seemingly play forever, I don't know, it's just astonishing to take that kind of punishment and abuse and just keep coming back for more. Hey, I got a question. Say hello to Dave. What's up, Dave Rustic? And Brian is asking a question. He says, Mike, is this the most rookie running backs you've ever seen in the top 50 fantasy rankings to start the year? Are they worth the early risk reward, or do you go after the rookies in the later round?
There's obviously we haven't gotten to the running backs yet, but there's definitely maybe 2, 3, 4 rookie running backs. You could go after it at some point in the top maybe 5 to maybe 4 to 10 rounds. There's a few other guys. Actually, there's several other guys who you might want to look to in the later rounds, or again if you're in a dynasty league, something like that. I would definitely agree, though. This is a huge year as far as an injection of a lot of really nice rookie talent, maybe in the top 70 or 80 overall running backs for fantasy. So, yeah, I would definitely agree with that point.
Okay. And the proper segue there would have been to wait till we finish tight ends and go right to it, but I didn't want to forget. I'm kind of new at broadcasting this way on Facebook Live and taking the questions. So if you're going to take the time to write a question, I really want to try to work it in if I can while I can. So anyway, back to tight ends. You got Olson, Reed, Kelce, Gronk. So then with the second tier, now we're getting into some of the guys that, they like Eifert. He has potential, but he has an injury history. Jimmy Graham, used to crush it and has been kind of disappointing in Seattle. Who do you put in tier 2?
Yeah, so tier 2 is going to be Eifert, Delaney Walker, Jimmy Graham, and I really like Martellus Bennett a lot this year in Green Bay. I think Rodgers has been kind of waiting for a tight end who has this much experience and this much talent. So, in an offense like that, who doesn't just have a great running game and they're just going to pass the heck out of the ball, Bennett's a guy I could see having, maybe 65 catches, 800 yards, and 8 to 10 touchdowns. So I'm going to go with Eifert, Walker, Graham, and Bennett for tier 2.
All right. Then over on to tier 3, I guess you'll maybe put Rudolph in there, Ertz, Ebron, maybe?
Yeah, there's a few guys. I'll be honest with you, it really starts to thin out immediately after tier 2. Rudolph's not a guy that I really care for much. That offense just doesn't have a lot of firepower, in my opinion. Austin Hooper is a guy I don't put a lot of stock in. I don't know, just don't really care for him. Zach Ertz is another guy, if you're in a PPR league, maybe I like him a little bit more. Eric Ebron has so much potential, but, I've seen some stone hands show up for that guy. My wife is a giant Lions fan, so I clearly watch a lot of Lions games, and the potential is there. It just hasn't come through. You know, a guy I like a lot is Hunter Henry, and I guess it's L.A. Chargers now. That's weird to say, but
so weird.
Yeah, it's just weird to say. Hunter Henry, though, you know, if you paid attention last year, when Antonio Gates was either hurt or just getting old, you just saw the flashes of brilliance from Hunter Henry, and as we all know, Phillip Rivers has is hooked up with his tight end Antonio Gates for how many years now. So I'd like him to emerge this year or even next year potentially. Rounding out the third tier, then I suppose Kobe Fleener and Jack Doyle, and that's probably about it. Not
even Jason Witten?
Well, I guess if you're in a PPR league, yes. But other than that, I mean, I don't know. I could see Witten potentially going undrafted in a lot of leagues, honestly.
Oh, okay. Well, then I guess maybe we could just leave it there for tight ends then. If you wait that long to go that far, you probably should have picked earlier. Is that fair to say?
No. Yeah, there's a couple sleepers I kind of like, and mainly focused around rookies. Tight end Evan Ingram of the New York Giants. He's almost like a wide receiver. He's a very athletic guy. If I had to compare him to maybe like a Jordan Reed, where he's not like a huge guy like Gronk, but he's just got great hands, very athletic, very fast. And I think the Giants haven't had a really great tight end in a while. So, potential sleeper opportunity there. O.J. Howard was, I believe, the highest rated tight end in the draft. Again, with Jameis Winston having Mike Evans, Deshaun Jackson, there's some targets. They're going to go to those guys, but O.J. Howard's a guy to potentially look at. I like your guy Njoku there in Cleveland. Again, I just don't know exactly on what he's going to do, but kind of obvious rookie tight ends there that I like. But there's potential there.
Well, I'll tell you, with Njoku, there was a play. Man, I'm telling you, Kaiser rifled it to Njoku, who was sprinting downfield, just a dead sprint. Had his guy beat by a mile. Kaiser overthrew him by about a foot and his outstretched hand. Otherwise, that would have been a bang-bang 40-something yard touchdown. Like, I'm telling you, I'm expecting some crazy good things from the Browns. I mean, I am the eternal Browns optimist. I do understand this. I admit it. I know I say this every year, but I'm seeing some really nice signs out of him, and hopefully Njoku will be part of that. I mean, we let our tight end go. We let him walk, so hopefully they have a plan. Hopefully this is going to turn into something good. So anyhow, let's move over to the running backs where we made that odd segue a little too early. I've won leagues. I think you recall that one league, Mike, many years ago when it was maybe my first fantasy football season. I had Ray Rice and LaShawn McCoy, and I just rode those guys to a championship that year. But then the running back position has been really janky. It's been really weird. It's been really up in the air for a while now. There's injuries, there's suspensions, there's running back by committee. Talk about the best running backs in the league, because right now, for example, Ezekiel Elliott, he's suspended for a bunch of games. Le'Veon Bell, he's been holding out. David Johnson, he's doing great, but, I mean, how much longer is that quarterback going to last out there? And if he goes down, what's the plan? Is Johnson as good? There's a couple question marks at the top. So who's in your first tier?
Yeah, so first off, I definitely agree with your analysis there of running backs. So it's kind of just, I'm looking through like the top 40 here, and it's just, there's so much unsurety about like almost everyone. I know it's weird to say that, but you and I could sit here and talk about a scenario for like almost every one of these guys of, should I or shouldn't I take this guy? So, yeah, let's see, the top tier running backs, definitely David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell, LaShawn McCoy. I like Devontae Freeman a lot, though, even though Tevin Coleman's there, he just produces. Melvin Gordon's up there. He had a huge college career. Started off a little slow his first year, but last year they really started to feed him the rock. Danny Woodhead is no longer there, so I like his potential. Jordan Howard last year playing in a really bad offense. Even if you take away all the receptions he had, still had a really, really solid year. So, and that team's kind of rebuilding right now. They got obviously the first pick in the draft, Mitch Trubisky. We don't know if he's going to be any good yet, but certainly a rebuilding team, but Jordan Howard's got a lot of potential. Leonard Fournette, it's kind of a question mark for me. I think if you've been paying any attention, Blake Bortles has just absolutely struggled in preseason. So the question there is our defense is just going to go, we don't respect the pass at all. We're just going to stuff the box and make them beat us, the other way. But then again, on the flip side, I saw some tape of him in preseason. The guy is an absolute beast. We all know he had a good college career. Jay Ajayi, too, has also had a nice preseason. A little bit up and down last year. He obviously had the 3 200-yard games. And that's probably going to cap it off for my tier 1. I think I got about 8 running backs in there.
And so with all those, you're basically saying it's a coin toss, or within – well, then what's 1A? Who are the top 4 that are head and shoulders above? If you had to just brass tacks, I gave you 4 bets to place on the roulette wheel. Who do you go with? Your top 4.
Yeah, so I go with Johnson, Bell, McCoy, and probably it's really close between Freeman and Ajayi, so that's a coin flip there.
Okay. Yeah, and of course that's taking into account that Ezekiel Elliott, he's going to be missing so many games. Where do you draft Zeke? What round do you wait to? Do you take him in the first? Do you take him second, third? What do you do? He's out for 6 weeks.
Well, yeah, and obviously, if Ezekiel Elliott's not suspended, he's a no-brainer, top 3, 4 running back, playing behind that offensive line.
Yeah.
Now, again, I think he's out for 6 games. So, again, if you're new to fantasy, most regular season in fantasy go for 13 weeks. So that is just under half of your entire regular season. You're not going to have your potential number 1 or number 2 round pick. So it's a matter of when are you willing to draft a guy and not play him for 6 weeks. In my opinion, I'm probably not taking him any earlier than maybe round 3. If he happened to be there around 4, which is probably a miracle. So maybe around 3, but Brian, if I got to round 3 and there was a lot of guys who I really liked, it'd be really hard for me to go, I'm going to chance my whole season, on wasting a 3rd round pick on a guy I can't even use. So it's really dicey, but if I had to guess, round 3 or 4 is probably the earliest I would take him.
Okay. Yeah, and that's fair. I mean, that's, in the Dynasty League, I took Le'Veon Bell. I got him with my 2nd pick because he was out, So, anyway, you do what you can sometimes. I agree. I wouldn't take him too high just, if you're a Buckeye fan or a Cowboy fan or no matter how much you like him, he's just not going to produce for 6 games. That speaks volumes. That's going to, I don't know. But in a lot of these leagues, you wonder, can people help themselves? Can they wait through 2 picks? Can they get through 3 picks without taking Zeke if he's still on the board? Usually somebody cracks and goes, he's just too good. I know that he'll help me late in the season. I'll figure it out. But, hey, that's for each league to decide and for you to decide as a player. All right, so after some of these guys like Ajayi, Howard, Freeman, Fournette, now we get into some other really good players that if the ball bounces the right way, I mean, I could see a lot of this next tier 2, a lot of these guys could have a really good season.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said earlier, Ezekiel Elliott would always be in tier 1, but for me this year, he's going to be in tier 2. Well, so we'll start tier 2 with Ezekiel Elliott. DeMarco Murray, he's 29 years old, but I mean, heck, he's behind one of the best offensive lines in the league. I think he had over 50 catches last year. So even though they've got Derrick Henry there, I think Murray's got maybe a couple of years left in him. So I like him a lot. Todd Gurley, not a great season last year. They brought in a new offensive coordinator. They made some improvements on the offense overall. Brought in Sammy Watkins. I think they had a couple decent draft picks. Jared Goff developing in his 2nd year. So you still got to respect Gurley. You can't put him in tier 3, in my opinion. So he's still in tier 2. Lamar Miller, even though kind of an average year last year, a little bit underwhelming, he's still respectable in tier 2. Old Marshawn Lynch coming out of retirement there. He's probably in tier 2. I mean, Oakland's going to have a good offense. He's going to be a good red zone threat, maybe at least 10 touchdowns, if not higher. And honestly, there's a couple other guys who are kind of borderline here. Maybe Ty Montgomery, and I'm kind of borderline in that, even though I'm a Packers fan. I'm not 100% convinced he's going to get just a ton of carries. And then I'm gonna go ahead and throw a curveball. I'm gonna bring in Dalvin Cook and Christian McCaffrey into the bottom of tier 2, and that's going to end my tier 2.
All right, Cook and McCaffrey in tier 2. Now, let's remember the running back position and the flex position. I mean, how many good running backs do you think you need to have throughout a season, Mike? Do you put more stock in picking players up on waiver wire versus drafting a deep class of running backs? Where do you stand on the strategy of the position in general? Because it seems like the receivers get some more love because of how it's scored and how many good players are available. But, I think a lot of it comes down to how many are in tier 1, tier 2 versus, just a totally different running back by committee situation. How much do you value the running backs? How many should people have?
Well, I mean, if you look at your, if you're looking at a cheat sheet right now, anyone who's on the Facebook Live or anything, I mean, look at how many running backs and how many wide receivers there are compared to all the other positions. So what does that tell you? That tells you that those are the most valuable positions by far in fantasy football. So you need to stockpile your roster full of each one of those. On my bench, let's just say if there's 6 spots on my bench, I do like to have one backup quarterback. The only way I'm going to have a backup tight end is if it's a really good value. If I can get Martellus Bennett really, really late, something like that. Other than that, I'm going to have one quarterback, and everything else is going to be running back and wide receiver. Because, you could sit here and draft 3 quarterbacks and 2 tight ends, etc. But if you draft all these running backs and wide receivers, some of these guys are going to end up being like, diamonds in the rough. You're going to have a guy like, not to jump down too far, like a Kareem Hunt, running back Kansas City. So they've got Spencer Ware there, but from what I'm hearing out of camp, Kareem Hunt's actually the guy that's impressing. So for all you know, by week 5, if Spencer Ware doesn't do anything, and you drafted Kareem Hunt in the 15th round, and you got him on your bench, all of a sudden you've got a starting running back. So yeah, you got to draft the heck out of both those positions.
And just take it easy on the quarterback having a second good one. It's not that important to you, huh? If there's enough on the waiver wire.
You definitely want to have a backup quarterback. You don't want to have Aaron Rodgers, and what if he gets hurt or has a bye week? You want to have someone respectable. Grab Aaron Rodgers, and then grab like a Carson Wentz, Stafford, Manning, even a Carson Palmer, someone respectable who could fill in if you needed him.
Yeah, but there's no need to take him the next round or the round after that. Get a few more rounds of drafting. And what round do you recommend taking a quarterback in generally?
Well, and it just depends on. It honestly depends on how is the draft playing out. I mean, are top tier quarterbacks, are they slipping to the point where you're like, wow, I can't believe Drew Brees is here and it's round, whatever you think, round 6 or round 7, something like that, and you're like, wow, there's no way I could pass him up. So there, the value is outstanding, but it's also really tempting. You're in the 3rd, 4th round, and you've got a couple of running backs and maybe a wide receiver. And all of a sudden, Aaron Rodgers is sitting there. It's tempting. So then you have to sort of look at who's left and go, do I want to take a Golden Tate or do I want Aaron Rodgers? So at that point, it's a personal call, but you just have to kind of understand how the draft is going. You have to look at who's left and look at who you've already drafted, and then you kind of weigh, do I want to take this pick on a high-end quarterback or do I want to wait?
In a way, it is kind of like playing poker, isn't it? There's some feel. You feel out the table, you feel out the group, you feel out the season, you play your hand and you play the other person.
Absolutely. And, one thing I recommend is, have that cheat sheet ready. Make sure you're marking off every single player that's drafted as they get drafted. That way, you can, when it's getting close to your pick, you can sort of view the landscape and see who's left, see who you like. Also, you highlight some sleepers. As the draft gets near the final 5 or 6 rounds, start highlighting or circling guys you really want to get if they're left later on. That way you don't forget about it.
Ah, exactly. Yeah, I think that is very important. A lot of drafts are done digitally, but I think paper and pen is sometimes the best way to do it. Use a highlighter, It's just so much easier taking notes for me that way sometimes. But maybe it's because I'm old school. Well, let's go into tier 3 with the running backs. Now we're into some of the players that. Okay, so I mean, there's a lot of talent in here. But how do you sift this group? Who do you think kind of has the most potential in tier 3 at running back?
So tier 3, here's where it starts to get kind of dicey. So this is where if for some reason you went Gronk, Rodgers, and a couple wide receivers, and your potential of starting running back could be like Isaiah Crowell, Carlos Hyde, Frank Gore. Then it starts to get really dicey. So I'll sort of go through my tier 3, but I'm not really thrilled about a lot of these guys. So yeah, Crowell, Hyde, I guess Powell, Frank Gore. Joe Mixon's a guy that's had a lot of buzz going around him. There's probably a good shot he could maybe win that job in Cincinnati. They've got Gio Bernard and Jeremy Hill, but they've had those guys for years, and what have they really done? So Mixon's a guy who could be pretty good. Maybe more in a PPR league, Danny Woodhead. Other than that, standard league, I'm not thrilled about him. C.J. Anderson's a guy that he's a solid producer as long as he can stay healthy. Probably Darren McFadden, but again, if you're going to draft him, he's going to maybe be great for 6 weeks, and then you could potentially drop him. So he's a guy. If you do draft Ezekiel Elliott, you want to make sure you get Darren McFadden. That way you've got that buffer for the first 6 weeks. Filling out tier 3, how can you forget about Adrian Peterson? I mean, for some reason, ESPN has him ranked as the 31st overall running back. They've got Mark Ingram ahead of him. I'm sorry, but if Adrian Peterson is close to 100% and he's on an offense with Drew Brees, I mean, both those guys are going to be going, 100%. So I got to think Peterson has, I hate to call him a sleeper, but, I'd be okay with him as my number 2 running back as long as I have some really solid wide receivers and a really good quarterback. So don't forget about Adrian Peterson for sure. Again, Doug Martin, listed as number 34 on the list. I think he's suspended for 4 games, but heck, if you can get him in the, 7th round or something like that, 8th round even, some good value there. Really like Amir Abdullah in Detroit. Kind of been, I believe, injured most of last year, but never really had a chance to shine yet, and they don't really have anyone else, that's really talented there at the running back position.
Hang on, let me jump in there, because I've had Theo Riddick on my team, and he's put up some amazing stat lines. Theo Riddick over with the Lions.
Yeah, and he's primarily their third down back, pass catcher guy, so he's really valuable in a PPR league. The cheat sheet I have printed off here is a standard league, so that's probably why I'm guessing they don't have Riddick higher on here. But, just in a standard league, I think Abdullah is maybe a little bit higher. I could actually see Riddick being ranked overall higher than Abdullah in a PPR, but it depends on what kind of league you're in.
Right. I mean, you go down here, and there's still a lot of players that are going to be scoring a lot of touchdowns. James White in New England, Rodgers in Tampa Bay filling in for those first 4 weeks. LeGarrette Blount's over there on the Eagles with not much in front of him. Forte, I mean, he's old, but he's sitting there on a Giants team that's going to be running it. That two-headed beast of Jonathan Stewart, the stuff that they have going down there in Carolina now that they got McCaffrey, who knows. Do you see Christian McCaffrey as an everyday back, or is he going to play receiver most of the time? What are they settling in on with him?
Oh, that's a great question. From what I've seen, obviously, if you don't know, if you're on the Facebook Live, I live in Charlotte here, so I see plenty of, preseason highlights from the Panthers, and it's been nothing but Christian McCaffrey. Clearly he was the primary back there. I believe it's Stanford, if I'm correct. He just absolutely tore it up. So, honestly, I don't know for sure, but I can't imagine Jonathan Stewart has just a ton left in the tank, and I could see McCaffrey being a guy who's kind of maybe like that. I don't want to call him a Danny Woodhead because I think he's got a lot more true running back potential than Woodhead. But he's a guy that, particularly in a PPR league, I really am starting to like a lot more and more.
Okay, I'm gonna read off people's names. tell me what you just give me a quick response. What you think about him, because I want to tear through some of these like tier 4 and 5, because there's got to be some people we got to add for bench depth who might have potential here. All right, thoughts on James White, New England?
James White, primarily more of a receiving back. So if PPR league, if you get him real late, I'm okay with that.
Derrick Henry, Titans.
Yeah, Derrick Henry's a guy. If you get DeMarco Murray, you're going to want to make sure you get him. Murray, as we know, could go down any day with an injury. So a lot of potential there. Great college career, so pretty solid.
Blunt over at the Eagles?
Yeah, they've got a couple other running backs, Wendell Smallwood and someone else I forget. They're decent. So Blunt's going to be a guy, but probably at least 10 touchdowns. Maybe don't look for 1,000 yards, but he's a good mid-round pick.
Alfred Morris, Cowboys.
Yeah, I'm going to pass on him. I don't think he should be drafted at all.
Okay, good. What about TJ Yeldon? Is he a goner now?
Well, yeah, they drafted Yeldon, a couple years ago, and he just kind of didn't do a whole lot. And they clearly, bought the farm with Leonard Fournette there. So TJ Yeldon probably not going to be drafted in a lot of leagues. I guess maybe if you have Fournette, you could grab him as a handcuff. Other than that, I'd probably pass on him.
Jamal Charles on the Broncos.
Yeah, it's crazy to say. I've read some reports that he might struggle to even make their roster, which is kind of odd to say for a guy who used to be maybe the first overall pick in fantasy football. But they've got C.J. Anderson and Devontae Booker. So I'm not sure if they're going to want to keep Charles around. From what I've heard, it maybe depends on how he does week 3 of preseason. So just keep an eye on that battle, running back battle in camp, and then go from there.
Fat Eddie Lacy, Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, I've heard he's really struggled in preseason. We know he's. I think they gave him a bonus to stay under a certain weight, and I guess he did it. But I've heard he looked kind of slow in preseason, not a lot of bursts. So I wouldn't put a lot of money into Eddie Lacy, but maybe I don't even know, 7th, 8th, 9th round pick.
Tevin Coleman, Falcons.
That's another guy that it's going to be week to week. One week he'll have 25 fantasy points. The next week he'll have 2, just because they have such a platoon there in Atlanta with Freeman. So it's he's kind of a plug and play guy and just and roll the dice. So I don't know, maybe 8th, 9th, 10th round.
Anybody else you wanted to touch on?
So if you're looking at ESPN cheat sheet, number 61, Dante Foreman for Houston, just an absolute beast in college. I believe he may have had some off-the-field issues, if I recall. But other than that, he's the guy behind Lamar Miller who maybe more in a Dynasty League or, like a 15th, 16th round pick might be worth a look.
Okay. Anyone else?
Let's see here. Kind of like James Conner, rookie running back for Pittsburgh. I think he had the some sort of a disease or something like that. I don't know if it was cancer, but the guy completely fought through it and got through that, and has been having a real nice preseason. You could see him maybe getting some work behind Le'Veon Bell, but that's a very, very deep pick if you're thinking about him.
Exactly. Okay. Well, then let's scoot it over to wide receivers. Would you agree that wide receivers are the most important position in fantasy football? Everybody thinks quarterback, but I've had the experience lately that it seems like wide receivers premium has changed. The value of having 2 very strong receivers is almost a prerequisite to weekly competition. Am I off base there, or would you hedge your bets differently?
I think that, again, I could sit here and argue that it depends on a lot of variables, but I think running back or wide receiver is probably the most important position, because I'm going to go back to, again, because you have the most of those players more than likely on your team. If you've got Aaron Rodgers, that is maybe the best player in your team, but who are the most valuable and important players to have? It's going to be have that good core of running backs and wide receivers, and then build around that. But yeah, there's a lot of great wide receivers this year for sure.
All right, let's get into it. Round 1, top tier. I would probably have Julio, Antonio, Mike Evans, and I don't know about Beckham with his injury. Where do you put your first tier?
Yeah, so I'll probably stick to the top 6 that ESPN has: Brown, Beckham, Jones, Evans, Jordy, and AJ Green.
And out of those, who do you like? Who do you expect to have the biggest year?
I could see it being Julio or Mike Evans. Antonio Brown is right there as well. But if you ever watched the Buccaneers game, I mean, Jameis Winston probably throws to Evans almost too much. So he's a guy who just gets so many targets. I could see him breaking out and being a top 2 or 3 season this year.
Yeah, it's all in the cards right there for the Buccaneers to just light it up. Actually, pretty excited to see the Browns week 3 because they call this one the dress rehearsal. It's where more of your starters play more of their snaps to kind of get everything ready. And nice to see Desean Kaiser get the nod because usually that's who you're going to start the season with, is who you start week 3 with. So the interesting part on top of that storyline for me is seeing this high-octane Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense against this totally revamped Browns defense that with Greg Williams as the defensive coordinator, drafting Jabril Peppers and Myles Garrett, the Browns defense has been looking filthy. They held the Giants to damn near nothing. And I'm seeing the players with very creative rushing strategies so that they can get in and attack the quarterback. I'm seeing takeaways, not just where there's a fumble or an interception. I mean, like, you go over and you grab and strip and rip the ball right out of somebody's hands. That's coaching. That's always just come down to coaching. And for too long, the Browns haven't had it. So anyway, I'm looking forward to seeing this revamped Browns defense that's looking very dynamic against the high-octane Tampa Bay Buccaneer offense. So, yeah, definitely hoping to see some big things out of Mike Evans. I have Jameis Winston and Derek Carr in my Dynasty League, so I am stacked for years down the road. These two looking like they're up-and-coming quarterbacks who kind of have some stuff locked in, which is good. So, yeah, definitely looking for big stuff out of them. So let's go back to wide receiver 2 position. That's where you're probably going to put – man, it's so interesting looking at the list here with Terrell Pryor, Doug Baldwin, Amari Cooper, Brandon Cooks. Who do you put in 2?
So T.Y. Hilton. I love Michael Thomas this year. I mean, he kind of under the radar had an absolutely monster season last year in New Orleans, and now that Brandon Cooks is gone, I mean, Thomas could have a top 3 to 5 this year. So love him. Terrell Pryor is another guy. Never had a Giant. I was never a Giant fan, but he's probably the biggest target that Washington has now. So I'd like to see what he can do with Kirk Cousins. You can't pass up Doug Baldwin's last 2 seasons. He's had, I believe, over 10 touchdowns and some really solid reception and yardage each year. So unless something changes with Russell Wilson, Doug Baldwin is tier 2 for me. Amari Cooper, a ton of potential. Maybe underwhelmed a little bit last year. I think I had him in a league or 2 and wasn't completely impressed with his performance, but still a lot of talent there and a good offense. Brandon Cooks has the potential to catch over 100 balls this year, in my opinion, so absolutely love that guy in a PPR league. DeAndre Hopkins, probably still need to put him in tier 2, but I put him near the bottom of tier 2. Very poor season last year. I think Watson has some good potential if he ends up being the starter there, but with the uncertainty of the quarterback position, I'm not going to be extremely tempted to draft Hopkins unless he's there, maybe a little bit lower than I would think. Alshon Jeffrey with Carson Wentz at the helm, I think has potential to have a pretty solid season. Dez Bryant, again, I don't know exactly what happened last year. When he did play, it didn't seem like he got anywhere near as many targets as when Tony Romo was the quarterback. So I think he's still in tier 2, but again, I'm not really jumping at. It doesn't jump off the page at me. Demaryius Thomas is always a real solid choice. Not as great as he used to be with Peyton Manning, so that's why he's in tier 2 now. And then I'd probably round it off with Crabtree and Allen Robinson, and I'd probably stop right about there.
How do you think Allen Robinson? Is it going to be Chad Henne at quarterback?
You know what? I certainly hope not. And honestly, if that happened, Robinson would probably fall down to my tier 3. But as poor as Blake Bortles has performed, a couple seasons ago, he had a real nice season. They've invested a lot of money in that guy. They've sort of built the offense around him and brought in some weapons. So, again, as long as Bortles is there, I'll at least give Robinson a shot. But, I would definitely downgrade him, though, if Henne starts the season.
And did you have Demaryius Thomas now slipping into the 3rd tier?
No, he was in tier 2 still.
Oh,
yep.
Okay, so that's Thomas as well. All right. Let's go into tier 3 then.
Sure.
Golden Tate.
And honestly, there's some real good talent here. Maybe a little bit more in a PPR league, but guys like Devontae Adams, Golden Tate. Golden Tate's a guy. He's going to get a lot of receptions. Maybe he doesn't have 1,300 yards and 12 touchdowns, but if you're in a PPR league, I definitely see some good potential there. Devontae Adams is arguably the number 2 receiver there in Green Bay. I think him and Nelson both had over 12 touchdowns each last year. Rodgers is going to throw at least 30, if not well more than that touchdown. So that's a guy that has a lot of good potential. Martavis Bryant coming off, I believe it was either an injury or a suspension last year. I like him in tier 3. You got Emmanuel Sanders, Jamison Crowder. Like I talked about Edelman earlier. Again, more in the PPR league, just with the little crossing routes and things like that he runs. Guy that's kind of undervalued in my opinion, Kelvin Benjamin. Again, I think he's put on a little bit of weight in the offseason. Didn't have a fabulous year last year, but if you look at I believe it was his rookie season, had a great connection with Cam Newton, so I actually like him a lot.
Well,
Keenan Allen.
Wasn't,
sorry, go ahead.
Wasn't Benjamin injured the entire season last year?
Was it the whole season? I really don't recall. You could be right.
I feel like it might have been preseason, and he was lost for the season.
Yeah, that's
I'd have
possible.
to double check.
Sorry.
Yeah, but Keenan Allen, he's another one that's chronically injured.
Yeah, so I think he was out the whole season last year. But if you look at the previous 2 seasons, the guy was just a PPR monster. So before his injury last year, I mean, he was a top 10 receiver in both standard and PPR formats. So that's a guy that, if you're looking in the 5th, 6th round, if you need a wide receiver, I would definitely take a chance on a Keenan Allen, or a Kelvin Benjamin, see what they can do this year. And then going into tier 3 a little bit more, Larry Fitzgerald, I mean, he's always going to do something. I mean, he's not going to have a bad year. He's just a Hall of Famer, and Palmer loves him. That's maybe Stephon Diggs in tier 3, and that's probably about it for tier 3.
Okay. Well, once again, there's a lot of touchdowns sitting here in tier 4. So, where do you put people like Sammy Watkins and Kenny Britt and Deshaun Jackson and Pierre Garçon? I mean, there's a lot of touchdowns coming from here. Who do you like in the 4th?
Yeah, I mean, Sammy Watkins was always kind of up and down in Buffalo. Now he's with the Rams offense that really hasn't proven they can do a whole lot. They've had a decent preseason, but, how is he going to connect with Jared Goff? We don't know yet. So, kind of a dicey pick there. Tyreke Hill for Kansas City, actually not a bad little pick. Surprisingly for kind of a smaller guy with a lot of speed, he actually put up some decent numbers recently. Willie Snead, number 31 there in the wide receivers. If you look at his numbers over the past several seasons, more in a PPR league, but he's going to rack up some numbers there in that offense as well. Again, got to remember Brandon Cooks is gone, so Breeze only has a few guys to throw the ball to now. Jarvis Landry, another guy, again, more in PPR, but good potential there. Kenny Britt, his whole career has kind of been up and down. Maybe you take a flyer on him in the late rounds. I'm not a giant fan, and it has nothing to do with him being a Brown, but his career has just kind of not been great. Deshaun Jackson, boomer bust. Dante Moncrief's got some potential. already touched on Corey Davis. Yeah, I mean, Brandon Marshall, I'm surprised he's number 44. I think he actually has a pretty good season there in New York, and there's just some other guys, yeah.
Yeah, kind of looking through here. Ted Ginn getting old, but he's still in. Ted Ginn jumped into New Orleans. That's what they did. They got the Saints brought in Ted Ginn Jr. and Adrian Peterson. They got old, but I mean these are guys with some skills, with some moves. Yeah, Torrey Smith on Philly. Did Anquan Bolden? He just retired, right? Then we got John Ross, rookie in Cincinnati. Kevin White in Chicago, guy that's been injured, hasn't shown us much, but he's got a lot of potential. Corey Coleman, high draft pick last year with the Browns. Sterling Shepard. Who else do we like on this list? Macklin. Man, Macklin ended up on Baltimore. What do you expect out of Baltimore? Are they going to be a terrible team, or you think they're going to be respectable and competing for a division title where Macklin is going to get a chance to get some points over there?
Yeah, Baltimore is one of those teams. Obviously, they had their Super Bowl run. I don't even know, it's quite a while ago, but I kind of feel like maybe Flacco is just kind of one of those quarterbacks who he's going to get you like 18 to 21 touchdowns. It's not really flashy numbers, and they have some average wide receivers and average running backs, and they've got a solid defense. So it's like they're going to squeak into the playoffs every year. 8-8, 9-7, something like that. So I personally, from a fantasy perspective, other than Danny Woodhead and a PPR, I don't think I'm really touching too many guys in Baltimore this year.
Yeah, you got some interesting names here at the very bottom of the wide receiver. Nelson Aguilar, somebody I think you were high on a few years ago, not too much so far, still with the Eagles. Braxton Miller with Houston in year 2, see what he might be capable of. Cooper Kupp with the Los Angeles Rams. Mike Williams with the LA Chargers. Kenny Galladay with the Lions. Who else? Jordan Matthews. What do you think is going to happen to him moving to Buffalo?
Well, Sammy Watkins is gone. I'm trying to think. Look here. So he might end up being there. Well, no, they got Anquan Bolden. No, he retired.
Yeah.
So Bolden's gone. So you got rookie Zay Jones and you got Jordan Matthews. So Matthews could end up being kind of a sleeper guy there. He could end up having 60, 70 receptions in that offense, maybe 7 or 8 touchdowns. So if you get that guy, this is where we talk about stockpiling your bench full of backs and wide receivers. So you draft Jordan Matthews in the 15th round, he ends up having a top 25 season there. You never know. That's why you take those guys late.
Yeah. What do you think about Curtis Samuel over with the Panthers?
Well, I mean, that guy was an absolute burner in college up at Ohio State. So he could end up being the true slot receiver there. They've got Kelvin Benjamin, Devin Funchess most likely on the outside, and Olson at tight end. But you've got a real dynamic offense now. You got Curtis Samuel in the slot. You got McCaffrey coming out of the backfield. You've got a quarterback who can run. So all of a sudden the Panthers have a real dangerous offense, and Samuel's more of a guy kind of like better in the PPR league, if at best, but he's probably a pretty late round pick in my opinion.
Okay. Now, I mean, we're starting to wrap this up here. If there's any questions you guys want to ask, type them below. We're going to ask Mike Murray, fantasy football guru Mike Murray. Any of your questions, type them here on Facebook Live, and I'll see if I can get to them. I've gotten to a few already. We have team defenses and kickers. I guess before we start getting to that, is there anything we missed, any sleepers you have, or have we pretty much covered most of the stuff you wanted to say about most of the players?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, again, do some research. Go out to Roto World, Fantasy Pros. Don't just go to ESPN and Yahoo. I think the FantasyPros.com, I believe it is. They've got a real nice mock draft set up there. Where you don't have to draft against other live people. It's got a computer simulation that you can do as many mock drafts as you want. You have to wait on other people to join. Keep your eyes open as far as updates on players, training camp battles. Do some research on the internet as far as sleepers, things like that. But other than that, I think we covered most of it.
And I guess one more question that just came up that I was thinking about. Any advice with waiver wires and Any strategy tips on when to drop certain players versus when to pick up certain players? And if it's a bidding league where you kind of throw down money, you get say you get $100 to spend. Do you have any strategies on when you go strong after players and when you should just kind of wade into the waters, or when you should cut bait with the person you drafted? Because that's always hard to do, is saying goodbye to somebody you invested a draft pick in. But any tips on that type of roster management?
Yeah, so you were talking about like an auction league, or like where you have a certain amount of money, or fantasy money, if you will, every year, that you can use to bid on free agent players. So first of all, what you don't want to do, and I've seen plenty of teams and auction leagues that I've been in over the years, is to not use your money, to try to save that money until the end of the year or what have you. If there's a guy out there who's an absolute stud on the free agent waiver wire, make sure you get him. Don't try to go in with a real low bid or decide you want to keep that money. You need to win your fantasy league, through the free agent waiver wire. So you need to try to get those guys as soon as possible, because if you don't work the waiver wire, if you don't, try to make trades, you're not saying you're not going to win a championship, but it increases your chances of doing it. As far as, typical strategy about when to drop guys and what have you, if you've got a player on your roster that you maybe drafted sort of high, 5th, 6th round, if the guy isn't performing, heck, after 6-7 weeks, not saying you need to drop him, but definitely make sure you look at your alternatives on your bench and on the waiver wire for sure.
Okay. All right. Team defense. This is something, this is usually your second to last pick?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Team defense. This is usually the second to last pick?
Most likely. I would say 9 times out of 10, it's going to be your second to last pick. Now, if you're really satisfied with your roster and the number one defense, in your opinion, is still sitting there maybe in round 14, I can't blame you for grabbing, say, the Denver Broncos, because it is nice to have a real good defense. But yeah, most likely you want to save your 15th round pick for defense and then your very last pick for your kicker.
Okay, so do you have any thoughts on how they're ranked versus, is there any team you think is, like I said before, I think don't sleep on the Cleveland Browns based on what I've seen and the track record of their new defensive coordinator mixed in with all that young talent. I think the Cleveland Browns are going to be a legit defense, maybe a bit of a surprise. But, are you kind of going to go along with the general gist of how they have the top 10 ranked here, or are there a few that you would boost a little higher?
Defenses just, I tell you, they fluctuate so much. I'm looking through the top 15 on ESPN, and, other than the Broncos, Seahawks, I guess maybe the Chiefs, Vikings, maybe, I don't know, I guess Texans and Cardinals are okay, but it just fluctuates so much. So other than a few of the top ones there, don't put too much stock into the rest of the defenses. They're going to fluctuate quite a bit.
Would you say the same about kickers then? Just, pick up one and see what happens, or anybody you're kind of high on?
Let's see here. I'm trying to look through. I don't know if there's really anyone I'm really high on. Justin Tucker, they have here as the number one, but again, it just changes from year to year. Most of the time, I would say the really good kickers in the league are going to be at least in the top 5 to 10 for sure. You got a couple other guys who squeak in, maybe that no one drafted in the top 10, but so there's really not anyone that I really like. The only advice I can give you on kickers is get guys who are in good offenses, which is pretty clear here by the top 10 here. You got a lot of prolific offenses. You want a kicker who's on an offense who scores a lot of opportunities for field goals, extra points. That's really about the only advice I can give you for kickers.
Yeah, and yet Justin Tucker in that weird Baltimore offense, he's the number one. Go figure. All right. Well, man, I don't even know where we go to wrap this up, Mike. We kind of tore through this. I think we did a pretty good job staying relatively around the time frame that we were looking to do.
Yeah.
We've pretty much covered it.
One other comment. One other piece of advice is make sure you look at the bye weeks. You don't want your first two. If you're going to take, let's see here, David Johnson and Leonard Fournette, they both have the same bye week, so that's fine if you're okay with that, but just keep in mind in week 8, there's probably a much higher chance you're going to lose because you have your first 2 draft picks unavailable for that week. So that's my last piece of advice.
Well, that is a good piece of advice, but if you had the chance to get the player that you wanted, but that's the price you have to pay, is that really worth making another decision? How often do you make a different decision based on something like that?
Yeah, so it really comes down to if you're going to do something like that, if you're going to say, okay, I don't care if they have the same bye week, those are the 2 guys that I want, well, you're going to have to really keep in mind that, definitely don't take any other running backs that are on the same bye week, first of all, but make sure that you draft some guys who, during that week 8, when your top 2 picks are on a bye, make sure that the guys that you draft behind them at the same position, are first of all, that they're decent running backs, but second of all, what do their matchups look like in week 8? Make sure you draft a guy who's not playing the number 1 rush defense in the league the week you have to plug them in. So those are the kind of things you just need to consider.
Absolutely, man. Well, how many leagues are you in this year, Mike?
I've cut it down. I'm only in 7 leagues this year.
You were in 8 last year?
I was in 8, plus I was in a work league, which was not for money, but so technically 9, but yeah, I've cut it back to 7.
Whew, buddy. Well, I'm looking forward to it. I really like that we have the Dynasty component. It really changes things. It gives a totally different layer to it's a totally different perspective. It makes it a much more nuanced process trying to consider strategy, because now it's like, LaShawn McCoy's value in a one-season non-PPR league might be the number 3 running back. But if it's in a Dynasty League, factoring in for age, how far down does that value go? It's just very interesting to try to prognosticate years in advance versus 1 year. So, I often credit you for walking me through my first season, and you've done quite well for yourself. So hopefully this is the year that Planet ARF regains dominance and maybe even meets you again in the championship this season, because we've been a couple years off. But yeah, man, I think fantasy football and Texas Hold'em poker are some of the best games ever invented, because it's so much talent and background information that you can study and get better at, but then the other component is just gut instinct and feel and intuition, and you really can't coach that. You can't teach that, and so much of this is up to luck and scheduling quirks and injuries and free agency and weird stuff that happens. It makes for consistently fun experiences playing in the leagues. And yeah, man, I think it's a fantastic game, and that's especially why I appreciate having you on the program once a year, at least once a year, so we can do this. We always say, yeah, we should check in throughout the season, and we never have, but I'll say it again. We should check in throughout the season and see how that goes. But anyhow, Mike, any final words from you, sir?
No, I would agree with you. Brian and I had some great times in college playing Texas Hold'em. It's a fabulous game, and now I've sort of migrated to fantasy football, and yeah, a lot of strategy, and it kind of makes the NFL season a little bit more interesting, and you get into it with your friends and stuff. So yeah, a couple of great games you touched on. But yeah, I love doing the show, and I was happy to be on, man. Heck
yeah, man. Well, good luck to you this season. Not too much luck in those 2 leagues I'm about to draft with you, or the next one I'm going to draft with you in. But hopefully you come in second place to us. And yeah, we'll do this again next year, if not sooner. Mike Murray, Fantasy Football Draft Guru, as always. I appreciate your time. You have a good weekend, sir.
All right, take care, man. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, peace. There he goes, everybody. That is Mike Murray, Fantasy Football Guru. So, if you are not in the Unhappy Hour group, you need to do it. So go on Facebook, do a search for The Unhappy Hour Sports Show. The Unhappy Hour Sports Show. Our regular Facebook is just do a search, or just do facebook.com/TheNewAmericanMedia. Twitter, we're at American_media_. YouTube.com/TheNewAmericanMedia. Vid.me at, how does that go? Vid.me vid.me/TheNewAmericanMedia. You can do that one. And Instagram.com/TheNewAmericanMedia. Thank you for watching. Good luck this season in your fantasy league, and go Browns. Peace.